Hi guys, Sam Robinson here introducing your next video for the partner program. I'm now going to talk about the Boomerang English teaching method, and as I said before, this is a system we use to try and bring the language skills closer to the ideal of lean management and automation as close as possible. So just quickly, I'd like to introduce the three learning phases. What we have here is phase 1, which essentially means show me, phase 2, now learn more, and phase 3, show me your improved English. So phase 1, you could look at it this way: with 3 phases, you start out with the teacher doing most of the speaking, and over time you then interact together. And in phase 3, the student becomes an independent speaker. Maybe the teacher is only speaking up to 10%, but certainly the student should be doing most of the talking by then. So it's a process of handing them over the responsibility of using the target language at hand. Okay, so show me, phase 1 would essentially be they show me what they know about the subject. Phase 2, we then expand their knowledge, and phase 3, we get them to do a representation of the subject, and of course it should be better than phase 1. Now, going to each of these in detail, we have specific delivery methods. We have drills for them to practice. So just here in phase 1, like I said, it means show me. What we're going to do is we're going to get the student now to just express what they know about it and do a short presentation. Okay. Now, what we do is we give them a mark from 1 to 10. Okay, we give them a score to rate them. Of course, the second score we're going to give them at the end will ideally be better than the first, so they can see their improvement within one lesson or 2 or 3 lessons. So it's kind of a reward system and offers self-gratification very quickly, and students appreciate that. So if you have a group, we say make sure each student contributes equally. If you're teaching a group, don't let one student dominate. Make very clear that they shouldn't do that, and they should let others speak. And as a group, they should do a presentation and take turns talking about the subject. And when you give them this score, you have each student write down the result in a box in their student book. So if you look at the student book, at the beginning of each module, okay, there is a place for them to write their before and after score. It's a small 2 boxes actually. So like I said, that's a reward system, and we want to give them the impression that they are learning, that they're getting a lot of bang for their buck. So the presentation, maybe it's something like say it's human resources, and we're going to say, okay guys, today's lesson is about hiring and firing people, and you then ask them to present what they know about that, for example. And they might not know much, and they might be a lot lost for words. They might not know something like job interview or job application or CV or resume. They'll use sort of their own words to express it. That's fine. And then of course you're going to give them that vocabulary in phase 2, which I'll explain in a moment. And in phase 3, they'll give that back to you, in much better form. Okay, so let's go into each of these in a little more detail. We're going to phase 2 right now. We call it now learn more. Okay, this is the real teaching phase. They've done their little presentation, and now they can open their books. Okay, now in the book they get article, as you may know, and they want to read that out first, and that contains a lot of the vocabulary, not all of it. Okay, it contains a small mix of it, and then you're going to give them some more vocabulary later. When you do that vocabulary, okay, you write it on the board. It's in your teacher's pack, and they should write down the new vocabulary, okay, from the board. And they're going to do that in the left-hand column. You'll see in the student books there's a clear space on the left-hand side. That's not there for no reason. You get them to write down the vocabulary, okay, that you give them, which is the target vocabulary for the day. And then we run this thing called the ping pong drill. Okay, I'll explain that in a moment, which is where you give and take and talk about vocabulary together. Okay, and then of course we have a thing called the chaining technique, where we speak together using different grammatic forms. They ask each other questions. It's kind of like a little game, and it's called a chain because they rotate around the classroom together, sharing in the exercise. Okay, but it's a control practice with specific target language. Okay, you can see next there's a thing called the Outback structure list. That there is a list at the end of the book. If you quickly have a look at the teacher's pack and the student books, you'll see this thing called the Outback structure list, and that's a series of questions. Okay, and those questions are basically a list of questions that provoke them to answer in a certain way, and what they should be using in the answer is specific structures that you've taught them. Okay, so sort of like the UPEC list is essentially a process to review what they have learned. They review what they learned at the start leading up to the present. Okay, so what we basically do at Boomerang English, they learn something new each time, but we always go back to what they did before and we bring them up to the present and then learn something new. Okay, very effective way of maintaining and keeping what they've already learned and refreshing all the time, and keeping that lesson fresh. Of course, you know, each lesson has new structures, so you're going to add that on now. And the next point that you can see here is if there are no new structures, you make sure you just review an old structure from earlier lessons, again using the Outback list, or just, you know, flip back through your teacher's pack and just say, okay, we're going to review this. It's very important to have a structure in each lesson. And the last thing you can see here on my list, practice the advanced structure juggling techniques. Basically, I'll explain that later. All of this will be explained later in more detail. What that means is they mix in a random kind of order or a controlled order different structures. Okay, so the output structure is in a progressive mode in the same order in which they've learned it, and the advanced structure juggling is basically you mix the different structures out of order. Okay, and by structure I mean speaking structure. For example, you know, the structure "that's why." Okay, I bought a car, you know, so that I can drive to work, or they can say, you know, I need to drive to work. That's why I bought a car. That's the structure. Okay, and there's a lot of structures in the Boomerang English system. Some of them are grammatic, and some of them are just speaking structures. Okay, next. You go into phase 3, which is their final presentation. You know, like I said, there's a first presentation at the beginning where they kind of talk about what they know, and they try to express what they know about today's topic, business topic. But now we're going to have the students do their second presentation. Okay, and you need to make sure they use all the vocabulary from the unit, so they're going to build sentences. You need to make sure that some structures from that unit are used in their second presentation. And again, you need to make sure that every student contributes equally and adds some value to the discussion. And again, you give them another mark. Naturally, you're going to want to make them a better mark than the first. You know, maybe you'll give them like a 3 or a 4 in their first presentation and say, well, it's good, but it could be better. You know, we never tell students that their work was bad. We just say, well, that's really good, and of course, it could be better. You know, and when the mark is second, it's better than the first. It's going to be a 6, a 7, a 10 if it's really excellent. Okay, not often you want to give out 10s because, you know, they're going to think it's too easy. Keep them around 6, 7, up to an 8, so they always feel like they need to improve and keep coming back. And again, you get them to record their new improved mark in the box, which is right next to their the first one as well. You'll see 2 squares in there in the student book, so use those each time as well. Okay, so what we're going to do now, we're going to talk in detail about phase 2, which is now learn more, which is where the real Boomerang English method lays. This is the core of the Boomerang English teaching method. Okay, it consists primarily of 4 concepts, which is the ping pong drill, the chain method, Boomerang structures, and the advanced structure juggling method. We're going to look at each one of these individually, and we're going to explain them in detail. They are covered in the teacher's book for you to refer to as well. If your teachers ever need to have a look at that to refresh, or just show them this video. You can either teach them yourself or just show them this video, because it is the Boomerang English standard. Now the ping pong drill, you'll see inside the teacher's pack vocabularies, okay, for each lesson. And what you'll also see is a series of questions next to those vocabulary. Okay, so as I said, those vocabularies on the left, you just write those on the board for the students to copy. Okay, they're going to copy those into the left hand column in the clear space in their student book. And like I said, not all of those words are included in the text that comes with their lesson. They'll read an article, okay, but all of these vocabularies are relevant to the subject at hand. It's going to expand their business knowledge, of course. That's the idea, and we call them target vocabulary for the lesson. They're going to need all of these words for their presentation in phase 3 for that unit. And the reason why we write them down is it helps them learn spelling. Okay, and I mean, you could give them a photocopy. You know, that would be much easier. But what it essentially does, it helps us kill time as well, because while the teacher is just writing down these words, he's thinking, okay, what am I going to do here, what do they need here? It gives us a moment to step back and sort of calculate what we need to do next. Okay, so after they've written down the words and you've given them the vocabularies, you're gonna practice those questions. Okay, and here they are. Here's an example from key point 49 or lesson 49. Okay, which is from the lesson about brand backgrounds. Okay, you basically explain, if they've never done the ping pong drill before, you just say, hey, look, here's how it works. I give you a word. It's like ping pong. I hit them something, they hit it back to me. Okay, so you say to them, I'm going to give you a word. You have to answer whatever question I give you next with that word. Okay, so I'm going to ask you something, and your answer should contain this word somewhere within your answer. Okay, after some time they'll get used to hearing you explain it. Just say, okay, now we're going to do the ping pong drill. Okay, and they know what's coming because you've trained them over maybe a few weeks to know what to expect. So after some time they'll just become familiar with the term ping pong drill. And here's how it works. You're going to say to them brand, and using the question in your teacher's pack, you'll say, what is your favorite kind of jeans? And they should answer with something like, well, my favorite brand is Levi's. Okay, or my favorite brand of jeans is Levi's. Next you'll say something like, okay, your word is logo, to another student, or if it's one student, you say, okay, your word is logo. Then you ask them, the question is in the teacher's pack, what does their company symbol look like? And they'll say, oh, our logo has a boomerang in it. Okay, pretty basic, right? I'll finish these examples. Registered trademark, can you use the logo in any way you want? And they'll say, no, we can't. The logo is a registered trademark. We can't use it in any way we want. It's protected. Okay, next question. Exclusive rights. Who is the only company who can use this logo? And you'll say, well, Levi's has exclusive rights to their logo. Okay. Again, we'll talk about copyright. How do authors protect their books? And you say, well, authors protect their books because they have copyright, or they use copyright, or they have copyright protection. There's more than one answer that can possibly be given for each of these questions. What that basically does, it encourages the students to use a kind of flexible form of English. It's not fixed. We're encouraging them to use their own English, okay, whatever they're comfortable with. I mean, the most important thing is they speak correctly, right? And if they have some basic way to speak and express themselves, that they should express themselves in their own way. So we're not going to fix the sentence and tell them that we want it exactly to sound this way, as long as it's correct. So they're going to use that vocabulary in any way they want. The last example here is registered trademark. The question is, how did this company make their logo protected? And they'll say, well, they have their logo is now a registered trademark, or they've registered as a registered trademark, something like that. Okay. Again, it's flexible, and you want them to focus on using the correct prepositions, building a good sentence. Of course, they try to answer with a complete sentence, as we always say at Boomerang English. If I say to somebody, do you have a dog? The correct answer is yes, I have a dog. Oh no, I don't have a dog. So it's the same for the ping pong drill. Okay, they're going to have to use a complete structure to answer it. And again, if something's not correct, here's what we do at Boomerang English. If something's not correct, we say, do you mean this, or do you mean this? So maybe they forgot to say the word does instead of do, and they say they should say, what time does he get up? But maybe they make a mistake and they say, what time do he get up? Okay, and you don't just give them the answer. Don't just say, well, it's does. You ask them, is it do or is it does? And they'll say, so what time does he get up? Let them correct themselves and give them two options to think about it, and that's going to generate or provoke their natural ability to speak and help them think in English. Okay, so again, we don't give people answers. We say, is it this or this? And typically the second answer is always the correct one, okay, because that's what they normally remember anyway, which was the last option you gave them. Let's talk about the next phase of the teaching method. Actually, there's a few more tips here on the ping pong drill. As we say here, we don't explain the meaning of the word. So if they don't know the vocabulary, we don't really explain the meaning of the word directly. Like, we're not like a dictionary here. We actually, as it says here at the bottom, we use that word in 3 sentences. Okay. That way they get the word in context, okay? And we don't translate the word into the student's own language, okay? That seems pretty easy. It's a bit lazy in many ways, but what we're trying to do, we want the student to develop the ability to think in English, okay? And that thought process, what actually happens here is when people, maybe they say, for example, German students, and they're thinking in German and then speaking English, okay, and they develop a bad habit of building the sentence first in German and then speaking in English. And what they do then is they start trying to adapt the German structure into English, okay, and then the sentence comes out incorrectly because, of course, different languages have different structures. Things are in different places, and they're going to say it incorrectly. So we don't want them thinking in their own language, okay? We want them thinking in English. We want their thought process. I mean, the brain doesn't think really in vocabulary. If I say apple, you think of a picture of an apple, okay? And you kind of make it their thought process indirect if you give them their own language word, because then they go apple, and then they think of the word in their own language, and then it goes to the picture, okay? And we want to access the picture in their mind directly by strictly speaking, not using their own language, okay? Next part is the Boomerang English chain drill. Okay, the chain drill is very effective. It teaches grammar. Okay, so once you've done the vocabulary, we're going to give them some kind of either structure or grammar. Okay, and how that works is normally you need 3 students. Okay, if there's only 2 students, you become the third speaker yourself, and you change places. So what I've done here, I've done a little diagram with Charlie, John, and Paul. Okay, so let's just say the structure is, what is the best movie you have ever seen, okay, in present perfect. Well, what's going to happen with 3 people? Of course, it's better. Charlie will ask, what is the best movie Paul has ever seen? Then John asks, what is the best movie you have ever seen? Paul answers, the best movie I have ever seen is Harry Potter. Then John replies, the best movie he has ever seen is Harry Potter. And what we've effectively done using 3 people is have and has. Okay, and what we typically find in Boomerang English is when you've got 3 people, you have a complete grammar structure. Okay, I mean, Charlie would ask, where does Paul live? John asks, where do you live? Paul says, I live in Spain. John says he lives in Spain. So now we've got the whole use of the S form, do, does, I live, he lives, you know, so it's much more effective with 3 people. Now chaining and weaving, and it's really cool because if you've got something like 10 students, you'll get them to, again, chain around. So, you know, the first person asks the second person, the second person asks the third, and the third answers, and the second person replies to the first. Okay, now they've done the first set of 3, that's the first chain. What now happens is the second speaker becomes speaker number 1, and he's going to ask about the third person over from him. Okay, so the chain rotates around the classroom until all 10 people have done it, and all you basically have to do is feed them small parts of the sentence, so they have to build the sentence themselves. You know, using this structure, what is the best movie you have ever seen? Maybe I feed the second person something like book read, okay, or good book read. Okay, now they've got the adjective good, they've got the subject the book, and they've got the verb read. Okay, then from these things he will say, what is the best book he has ever read? Okay, another feed could be something like nice food, eat. Okay, then he asks, what is the nicest food he has ever eaten? So the students build the sentence themselves. It's just basically up to the teacher to feed the students the essential foundations of adjectives and verbs and vocabulary and nouns and so on. And the students have to think about it themselves. They have to choose the form eaten, not eat. Okay, they have to choose the form best, not good. Okay, or if it's interesting, they're going to say most interesting. Okay, so you'll get them to take hold of that English and use it in the correct form themselves. Chaining is very, very effective. We use it again and again at every lesson. And another beneficial thing about this diagram with Charlie, John, and Paul is you can use it for teaching one-on-one lessons. You can literally put a diagram with Charlie, John, and Paul in front of a single student, and the single student speaks on behalf of each of the 3 characters. Okay, I call them avatars because that's very familiar today because of the movie. So the one student will sit there and put his finger on each of the avatars, okay, and speak for them. He doesn't need to say Charlie says, John says, Paul says. Forget it. He just says, you know, what each person would say. So he would just put his finger on Charlie, then his finger on John, and his finger on Paul, and speak for them. Okay, so it sounds something like this. Where does he live? Where do you live? I live in Spain. He lives in Spain. Or something like this, future tense. What is he going to do tonight? What are you going to do tonight? Oh, I'm going to cook dinner. He is going to cook dinner. Okay, that basic. We only want them to use the target language. Okay, moving on. Okay, here's some tips. Remember, 90% of the speaking during the chaining method should be done by the students. So again, you're only feeding them the essential elements of the sentence. They build it up. You show an example, and then let the students build the structure themselves. Okay, only feed them the filler context. Okay, the contents for that you feed them are in the teacher's pack. Okay, so it's basically monkey see, monkey do. You just have to throw it at them. Okay, everything you need is in the teacher's pack. The lessons are very easy to deliver from the Boomerang English materials. You've got the ping pong vocabulary there. You've got the questions to ask. You've got the filler content. All the structures are there. It's quite a beautiful method, and it's certainly very effective. And as I said before, chains are best done as three-way drills. So if there's only two people there, you become the third person, or sometimes you become the first person. So get involved with them. And like I said before, if these single students, use avatars on paper, use Charlie, John, and Paul. Another thing is, okay, with Charlie, John, and Paul, they're all guys. I like to use a fourth person named Sarah and another pair of people called John's parents. Okay, that way you actually have 4 directions to go to. And the interesting thing about that is you use reflexive. Does Paul have any work to do in his garden? Does Sarah have any work to do in her garden? Right? Do your parents have any work to do in their garden? And they say, yes, we have some work to do in our garden. So the idea of avatars is very effective. Use the diagram, print it out, and you'll get your students speaking all over the place with all kinds of English. It's very, very powerful stuff. Next part. Review is about reviewing old lessons. We have this thing called the Outback structure list, as I said before. It's actually used from level 2 Boomerang English onwards. So you've got book 1A and book 1B. There are some structures in there, but it really starts at level 2. Okay, so the Outback structure list, it's in the back of the book. Just to summarize, here it is. Here as explained in the video. It's a list of all grammar and English structures contained within level 2 intermediate lessons. You can create your own structure list for level 1. That's very basic. As the student progresses through the list, they may tick off each one. Okay, this is to show what they've learned. So it serves as a record for students to show what they've learned and mastered. You could give a score for each structure. You could highlight some weaknesses. You come back to it very often. It's at the back of your teacher's pack. There's also the quick shooter guide for reviewing as well. The Quick Shooter Guide offers a selection of questions that help you rapidly throw questions at the student in succession, requiring them to answer with the correct structure from the Outback list. Okay, so that's pretty easy. Before you ask them the question, you'll say answer with so that plus can. You'll ask them something like, why do you have a car? Using the Outback structure list, why do you have a car? And they'll answer with, well, I have a car so that I can drive to work. Okay, it's pretty basic. Always throw them the structure first and ask them the question from the Quick Shooter Guide. And the Quick Shooter Guide is very effective because the questions are basic and it provokes the student to use the structure in a more creative way. Okay, some people are not so creative, but after some time they'll get used to answering with the correct structure. For students who are not so creative, I've had some kind of students who go a bit blank. They can speak very well, their grammar is good, but they're just not so creative. So what I got problem students like that to do, I get them to always talk about their 1 or 2 hobbies. Okay, so I had a guy, he loves his horses, he was living on a farm, and I always ask the questions about his horses, and he has the vocabulary. That way he doesn't have to be too creative. I'd say, why do you get up in the morning so early? And using so that, he would say, well, I get up so early in the morning so that I can feed the horses. Okay, so it's very practical. Then he has some go-to kinds of answers he can use. He has go-to vocabulary he can use, and he doesn't have to think about it. Okay. Now, as it says here at the bottom, employ the Quick Shooter Guide at the start of the lesson or at the end. Okay, using it at the end is a great way of filling in the last 10 minutes of if a student has learned the day's material too quickly. Okay, so if you've gone through the unit, you've got 10 minutes left, and you're thinking, oh, what do I teach now? You just go to the Quick Shooter Guide. It's your go-to move. Okay, so it keeps you out of trouble, and it basically stops you from looking like an idiot, and your teachers too. Okay, they've always got something to do, and you just flip it over and say, okay, let's do the quick shooter guide. Ask them some questions and drill it. And I mean, as a matter of fact, students need to always refresh stuff, right? And that's just how they're going to learn in a much more effective way. Okay. The final part here is to make students fluent. We've got a little extra thing called practicing advanced structure juggling. It is introduced step by step through the teachers packs. It's kind of hard for some to do it, so just to explain it, so far they've learned any number of structures. Okay, those are the same structures from the Outback list. The next step is to move in and out of those varying tenses and structures in different ways, so the student gets a feel of when to use what. Okay. Just to explain here, I mean, this structure list, the Outback structure list, contains a range of speaking structures that they can use in many different ways. Okay, I mean, another structure is basically going to, just for future. I'm going to have a party. Another structure is before, after, plus ing. Okay, and it sounds something like this: after brushing my teeth, I have breakfast. Okay, before going to work, I stop for a coffee. Okay, after getting to work, I turn on my computer. Okay, so that's a structure. They can use it many ways. Okay, so structure juggling means mixing the structures up. Okay, and what the structure list basically does, and I tell my students, you know, these structures are effective, they're useful, you can use them in any number of ways, and you should train your students to not even speak outside the structure list. Okay, because if they're speaking outside that structure list, they're probably speaking incorrectly. Okay, so control your students, say, hey, use these structures. When you stick to these structures, you're going to speak English correctly. Don't let them speak outside of that way, because this stuff works. Okay, they're their go-to moves. It's just basically teaching them to be fluent, and there's a good mix of structures there. Okay, they can get away with all kinds of stuff. They can express themselves in any way they need to. Now, as it says here, while it's a controlled exercise, it certainly helps develop a sense for English and reveals occasions in which the taught structures might be utilized in future. Okay. At the same time, it also shows weaknesses. Okay. If you find that one of the structures are kind of weak and they're not so good, well, that means they need to review that in a little more detail. Okay. So in many ways, it's a strengths and weaknesses analysis. The main purpose of this drill is to bring the students as close to the real thing as possible, which is English fluency. Okay, they're going to mix up stuff. So on the next page here, I have an example. Structures 13, 2, 5, 9, 8, 12, 15, and 17. Okay, you basically write that series onto the board. Okay, and they have their own structure list, and you can either show them their structure list while they're doing this. They should become familiar with it, which is fine. But you know, you say get out your structure list, and you'll put on the board a series of sentences. Okay, and they're also contained within your teacher's pack. So here's a series right here. A, have you heard the news? Okay, they should answer with structure 13. Yes, I hear he, structure 2. Well, structure 5, he needs to. I hear that, structure 9. Okay, and so on. Okay, so they're mixing up these structures that they should be familiar with. They've practiced them before in earlier units, and now we're going to say, okay, let's put this together. Let's play with it. Okay, you might even give them some vocabulary to mix up with, or you'll tell them, oh, I want you to talk about shopping. Okay, I want you to talk about buying groceries. Yeah, I want you to talk about shopping on Amazon. You know. So then, that's only if they're quite good at it, make it a bit more laser focused, okay? And here's how it might look. Just one point here before we move on though. At first, get them to write it down. Don't get them to speak it out loud, because they're going to then have to struggle with creativity and getting the structure right. First, get them to use structure juggling for writing, okay? If they are very advanced, then they don't need to write it, they can just speak with it, okay? So here's how it looks. Okay, have you heard the news? Mr. Eagle has decided to set up another subsidiary in his company. Okay, has decided. That's because structure 13, we talked about present perfect for new information, right? He has decided, not he decided. Structure B, yes, I hear he likes setting up new companies. Okay, structure 2 was like plus ing. He likes setting up, not he likes to set up. Okay. Well, before setting up, that's the structure I mentioned before, after slash ing. Before setting up a company, he needs to get legal advice from a good lawyer. I heard he's going to give a press release about it soon. Okay, now they're using the future tense. If he creates a new subsidiary, he'll lay off. Okay, that's if and will. Okay, then we have question tag. He can't just fire people, can he? Okay, well, what is the largest amount of people he has ever laid off? Again, using a standard structure there. I think the largest number of people he has ever fired at once was just 150 employees in the Netherlands. Okay. B, has he said anything about firing employees yet? Okay, that's about plus ing. Again, it's from the outback structure list. Answer, no, he hasn't said anything yet. But so far, he has spoken about outsourcing and cutting costs in a quarterly report. So, again, like I said, give them the structure list if they need to write it out. Let them do writing first, okay? And advanced structure juggling is often used for homework, okay? Throw that at them. It's very challenging. And it's going to develop their fluency. It's going to get them really thinking English. Okay. Now, one extra tip here. We've got an extra drill here in Boomerang English called a question building drill, okay? We start by saying you want to know or maybe. Okay, this triggers the student's realization that they have to start listening and catch the information that follows the rest of your sentence. Okay, they have to listen very carefully because, essentially speaking, you're feeding them all of the essential words they need to build the question. Okay, so there's examples here. You want to know how many children I have. Ask me. Okay, they can see the information. You want to know is not essential. That's belongs to the teacher. But there is the content. How many children I have. Ask me. The question they should ask is, how many children do you have? Okay, here's another one. You want to know what time I'm going to eat dinner. If they catch the information correctly, by listening carefully, they know that going to is the future. So they ask, what time are you going to eat dinner? Okay, or maybe I went shopping yesterday. They should ask, did you go shopping yesterday? So here are some examples. You want to know what kind of movie I watched last night. The signalers watched the signalers last night. They should ask, what kind of movie did you watch last night? Okay, something like you want to know the best movie I have ever seen. They will ask, what is the best movie you have ever seen? Okay, the reason why we created this question building drill with saying maybe, like or you want to know, is because a lot of students become very good at answering questions, but asking questions themselves is a bit of a weakness, you know, because a lot of schools you see the teachers doing all the asking. Right? The teacher's always doing the questions and the student answers. You know, that's a very typical thing to do. But when you say, okay, I want you to ask the questions, a lot of students can't do it, okay? So this drill is designed to make them a complete speaker. We want them to ask strong questions and strong answers as well. And the maybe thing, you know, that's very, very basic. You say, maybe I have a car. They should ask, do you have a car? Right? Maybe I went shopping yesterday. Did you go? Okay. Maybe I'm going to the party. Are you going to the party? Okay. It's very basic stuff. So you can use again the whole question building drill for any of the modules. You can use it to review vocabulary. You know, if you want to make it a bit more difficult. I often use it as warm up as well for the start of some lessons. Just going through different tenses if they're quite good, because I mean it develops the listening skill on the student as well, because they have to listen carefully and catch the correct tense. They have to catch the signals, you know, which the teacher has to provide, and then they have to, you know, really get good at question building. So it's one thing we really enjoy doing, and it's a fine-tuning process we've introduced at Boomerang English. Okay. And we're going to talk about the standard warm-up. I'm going to do a separate video on that, but basically the standard warm-up is we take them through all the tenses. Okay, we take them through as all the tenses that they can possibly do. Maybe they're only, you know, maybe they can only do 3 tenses because they're at level 1. Okay, we practice the 3 tenses as the warm-up. Okay, and once they're advanced enough, you know, I ask them a question in past, they ask me a question back. I ask them a question with normally, like, you know, what time do you normally get up? They should ask me one back. Okay, but at first, just ask them questions in the different tenses. When they're a bit better, they start asking questions back. When they're really good, they ask questions themselves using the avatar cards, and they answer those questions as well. Okay, but I'll do a separate video explaining the standard warm-up, because it's a very powerful technique that saves a lot of time in the lessons. Okay, so that sums up the Boomerang English method. Again, you can refer to the start of the teacher's pack where it's covered in much more detail, but I hope that sums things up.